Hey guys, just a brief recap of last week's class about composing your animation into a video. Let's get started. Okay, so we're going to be using After Effects to create our video using our rendered frames. So, first things we got to do is we got to make a project file for our animation. So, it's going to go to File, Save As, and then we're going to navigate to our folder where our animation already lies. So let me just figure that out. So for my instance, I'm just going to put it in my sample project folder. For you, you can put it inside your project folder, and I'm going to place it within my folder group. I'm going to make a new folder and just call it After Effects. Save that as whatever we want to call it. So just in our case, we can call it assignment 1 underscore comp. Alright, cool. So now that we've saved the project, let me just explain what's going to happen here. So After Effects behaves kind of similar to Maya in that it doesn't import files into our working file. So basically it's sourcing the image sequence from our rendered folder. Okay, so it won't embed them into our After Effects file. It's just going to use it. It's just going to source them from that. So if, for instance, you re-render your frames, you won't have to re-import. It will just take the same file name and update our After Effects composition. Okay, so to start off, let's make a new composition. So a composition is where our animated frames will reside within. So we'll just go to new composition. For us, we're going to go with a 1280 by 720. As you can see down here, it's a little bit different to our setup and class. They have a purely frame-based duration, whereas here it's frames, seconds, hours, and days. Okay, so for us, we're going to have 4 seconds, or if you don't want to do it there, you can write in 100 frames at the end, and that will equal 4 seconds. Okay, we're going to start from frame 1, 25 frames a second, and we're going to go with HDB, HDTV 720 25. You can change the background color of your composition here by changing it by clicking on the button and changing it to whatever color you have. So if it's a different color, like bright blue, you can bring it back to black. Alright, push OK. And you'll see we have created a new composition here. If your comp looks like this, so depending on the composition settings here, your comp might look a bit squarish. You can fix that by pushing this button here, toggle pixel aspect ratio. And you can toggle that, but depending on what setup you have, it might not occur. Alright, so now let's import some frames. So to do that, we go to our project tab here, or we can go to File, Import, File, but let's just right click, push Import, File. Now let's navigate to the image sequence that we want to render into a video. So I'm going to go to my documents. I'm going to go down to my JMC, Intro to 3D, week 5, and in my images folder, I'll get the image sequence that I want to use. So there's two ways we can import our animation. There's the easy way, which can be a bit buggy, and there's the harder way, which is more accurate. Basically, you have complete control of what you import. So I'll show you the quick way first. So the quick way to do it is to just click on the image, the first frame of your image sequence, and check on PNG sequence, and then push import. It will automatically determine which frames follow on from that first one because of the number of each frame. So push import. Now we can just drag it in. So in my case it worked quite well, but if you remember in class it didn't work that great. It went to frame 85 for instance and then chopped off for no reason. So sometimes it won't work, but if it does work, you can just follow this process and then we can scale it down. So you'll see that our footage is larger because I rendered at a higher resolution. So if you want to change the scale, we just push S on our keyboard, or you can push this little arrow here and you'll get the full list of things you can change. So 67%, and it's now the right aspect. And if I play it back, we're holding down, or not holding down, by pressing space, it will play back my frames properly. Now, if that process doesn't work for you, we can do it the long way. So the long way is where you import every frame of our animation individually. So to do that, we go to import, file, and we select the entire list of our image sequence. You'll see that by default PNG sequence will turn itself off and you'll get a whole list of names down at the bottom. If we just push import, it will process all those images and import every frame on an individual basis. Now if we want to get this looking like an animation, we select our entire list of files starting from frame 1 to 100. We click and drag it into our layers tab and you'll see that now every frame is in the timeline. Now we want to be able to stagger every frame down the timeline one after another perfectly within one frame each. So to do that, we'll click frame 1, we'll scroll down or scroll up depending on the order in which you selected your files. Shift select 100. Now to get it to be each layer to be only one frame long, we will hold down the Alt key and tap the close bracket, the square close bracket on our keyboard. So now it's only one frame long. Yep. Cool. So we'll click off all that again, and again repeat the process. Select frame 1, then frame 100, then go to layer or go to animation, keyframe assistant, sequence layers. Do not press overlap because then they'll overlap one another. Push OK and you'll see now the frames are staggering along the timeline frame by frame. And if I play it back, it does the exact same thing as our other imported files. But we still have the same problem where I've rendered my frames at a higher resolution than my composition. So to fix that, if you want to, we'll select every frame except frame 2, every frame except frame 1, and hold on this little circle, little squiggly circle called a pick whip. And this, if we hold it down and drag along to frame 1, you'll see a blue line. That's basically signaling to you that you're ready to parent all these files to the first file, or the first layer. We do that, and now if we tap S on our keyboard and scale it to the appropriate scale, 67%, every frame will follow through along like that. Yep. Cool. So, whether you go with this method or the other method is up to you. It just depends on what works for you. If you rendered a higher resolution video, you can simply make a composition that matches your resolution. So for instance, 1920 by 1080, if you had rendered at that resolution, and then just instead of having to scale down our footage, you can just import your files and then export a new video, and then we can scale down that video to the appropriate resolution for you. Alright, so let's turn this into a composition, a pre-composition, so we can do some post effects on it, because we want to be able to affect all these frames. We want to affect all the frames and not just the individual frames for this project. So to do that, shift click everything that we've got in our timeline so far, right click and press pre-compose. Just have the default settings, call this image sequence. Oops. And push OK. You'll see that now all the frames that we had are now contained within our image sequence layer. And in the project file, Adobe After Effects has created a new object called image sequence. Now, we can add effects directly on here, onto this layer, if you want to. But if you have multiple layers of different things in the future, when you start animating more complicated stuff in After Effects or doing more advanced post-production of compositions, you might not want to just affect the single layer. You might want to affect multiple layers. So to do that, we make an adjustment layer. So we go to New, Adjustment Layer. And this is where we put our effects to manipulate the look of our image sequence. So for instance, if I want to add a vignette, so this is just a custom layout that I've got, but normally you'll see these effects and presets settings here on the right side of your interface. So if I type in vignette, let's click on this one, I can click and drag it onto my adjustment layer, and you'll see the effect of what that has. So it's giving me a bit of like a dark border around my comp. And you can do that with all kinds of effects. You can use hue saturation to change the actual colors of your animation. It's all up to you, and it's up to you what you think is aesthetically pleasing to the eye. You can also change the exposure of your animation. So if you've rendered out your video and you feel like it's too dark or too bright, the exposure filter will help you correct that. So instead of having to re-render all those frames, you can just change the exposure to fix up that thing to some degree, depending on what file format you've saved your image sequence as. So the high quality image file that you're using, like a TIFF file, which is relatively uncompressed, versus a JPEG file, the TIFF file will retain more color and information and allow you to use this exposure meter more effectively. Alright, so now say I'm happy with this, I've done my effects and I'm ready to render. So to make a new render, we push Control M, and that will add our composition to our render queue. Now, To render this video, we have to choose our file format. So for me, I'm going to go with a QuickTime format with the animation codec. So it's relatively high quality, but the file size will be massive. So we'll have to convert this once it's rendered to a more usable file format, especially for your assignment submissions. So we'll just use QuickTime for now. We'll have animation format, push OK. And now we're ready to render with that format. We have to give it a file and a location first as well. So we will go into our project file. I'm going to put it in my movies folder, and I'm going to call it assignment 1 and push save. So now we've given it the right settings, and now it's ready to render. So if we go to our render button, it will start rendering like so. The little bar will show you the render progress, and I think by default it will show you like a preview of how it's being rendered as well. When it dings, it means it's ready. So if we go to our file or our folder, so if we go to our file, if we go to our folder, you'll see it here. A double click on this, if you have QuickTime installed, it will be able to be played back. Now look at the file size. It's only 4 seconds long, but the actual file size is massive. It's like 250 meg, which is ridiculous for an assignment this small. So let's convert this to a more reasonable file size and a more reasonable file format that can be viewed on more than just QuickTime. So we're going to convert this to an MP4. So you'll be submitting an MP4 for your assignments as well. So we go to our Windows tab. I'm going to type in Adobe Media Encoder. So this is what we're going to be using to convert our video. We click on that. Alright, so this is our Adobe Media Encoder. So this is basically software dedicated to converting video from one format to another. So to convert a video, let's just drag and drop our video. As you can see, we have already some defaults that it wants to convert to. So it already wants us to convert to H.264. But to change, if it's not by default changing to H.264, you can change it by clicking on the codec in question. So H.264 is the codec used for MP4 files. It's a bit confusing, unfortunately, but if you want to convert to MP4 in Adobe Media Encoder, just choose H.264 as a codec. See the format here? H.264. We can change the file name if you want to. We can change any presets, so if you want to change it to, say, a preset optimized for Vimeo, you can change it like so. You can even tell it which part of the video to render. If you want to only render half of it, you can do it like that. But we're going to go with the full length. We push OK. We make sure that our file export is going to the right folder, so for us it is. But if it's not, navigate to the right folder. So I'm going to put it in my movies folder within my Maya project folder. Alright, and once that's ready, click on the file and push play. And that will convert the video. Yep, we can close that now. And if we go back to our folder, you'll see a new file called Assignment 1 MP4. Open it up, and we can play it back, and it looks great. Now, let me just quickly go back to Media Encoder again and show you a little something to do with resolution. So if you don't want to resize your frames in After Effects and you just want to, okay, I'm going to use Full HD for my composition and I want to convert it back down to MP4 with 720p in post after I rendered my video. You can do so by changing your resolution from Full HD. So say your video is already at Full HD, you can convert it back down to 720p and save you the trouble. Okay? So to do that, let's just redo our image sequence, for instance, alright? Or at least make a new comp where it's at Full HD. So I'm going to make a new comp. Let me just close this. Composition, new comp. I'm going to go with a Full HD comp. Push OK. And see how it had that pixel ratio? There we go. New comp. I'm going to bring in my image sequence. It's going to play back at Full HD. I can export this at Full HD now. So if I push Ctrl M, I'm going to call this assignment 1 Full HD, FHD, push save, and then I'm going to render it. Notice how the rendering time is slightly longer as well when you're rendering a higher resolution video. It's going to be longer because it's rendering double the amount of pixels basically. Alright. Oops, sorry. So let's look at this new file we've made at Full HD. Not only is our video size double the resolution, our file size itself in terms of memory on your computer is also almost close to double. It's 400 meg versus 250. Now, this is when we really need to convert it down to MP4. So, again, media encoder. Now let's convert this to an MP4 at 720p. So we've got our file, we've got our settings, so I'm going to change it from Full HD to 720p. Now let's convert that to our MP4. Now let's have a look at that file size. Yeah, there we go. Both videos are very close in their file size. See that? Our Full HD MP4 is almost matching. It's basically the same size as our two. They're basically the same size of each other because they've taken the same settings from our converter and downsampled it, basically. So that's great if you don't want to have to do that whole resize thing in After Effects. And it looks practically the same too. So that's how to convert and create videos in After Effects and Media Encoder. Good luck with your renders and good luck with your videos, and I'll see you in a few weeks.